Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to yet another installment of Flyer Gonna Flyer, our 40th ever episode. It's crazy. We've gone 40 episodes in and we have reached the season's end. It's crazy how quick it's flown. We got a long one for you guys this week. So we're going to give pretty much a breakdown of the entire season, just our personal opinion a little bit, what went right, what went wrong, our favorite and least favorite moments of the year, player grading, and the biggest positives and biggest disappointment in terms of player production or pretty much expectations we had set for the team. And we're also going to be going over the expectations we have for the offseason, some potential trades that could happen. Who's going to be the next head coach? Maybe some moves in the draft, maybe even a free agency signing or two. So everyone sit back, get ready. This is going to be a long and fun one. Our next installment and final of the season of Flyer Gonna Flyer is coming your way next. Whew, I had to take a sip of water after that minute-long speech. You ever get parched when you're just going on and on like that? It's like, oh my God, suddenly I feel like I'm losing the sense of my tongue. But we got a great episode in store for you this week. Jamey may or may not be joining us at some point this week. He had something come up for Easter, but he is going to try to hop on some point. I told him it is going to be an extended episode, so he'll try to be here. However, we have one of my awesome, gracious co-hosts and one of our favorite guests. Let me start with said guest, the man below me from the OandBPuck, OandB podcast itself. Take a look for him on Twitter at OandBPuck. You know him, you love him. It's our favorite guest, Isaiah. How you doing today, buddy?
How you doing, gents? Thanks for having me on.
And you know, it's always a pleasure to have you on. This is a big episode for us, so thank you for taking the time out of your day to talk some Flyers hockey with us and go over the season. It's been one hell of a roller coaster, lots of ups and downs. You know, it's finally over, and you know, we got the fourth pick, boys. We got the fourth pick, or fourth best odds. So it ended up being a positive in that retrospect. We're not in the middle of the pack. But also the man to my left, one of my two gracious co-hosts, you know him, you love him, Mr. Eric Martino.
What's up, boys? Yeah, look, it's finally over, man. We did it. We got through the season. Even though that last game probably took about 10 years off my life trying to get the fourth best odds. They just had to do it to us. They just had to do it to us.
Usually when I'm watching a Flyers game and I'm pacing back and forth, it's for the positive outcome. And here I am, less than 3 minutes to go. The Flyers are holding on to a 1-goal lead, and they're suddenly got a power play. I'm like, please don't score, please. And I'm literally getting that feel of a playoff game, rooting against them. Like, no, we got to get the best odds possible. Don't score. We can't drop to the 7th pick or 6th pick. But thankfully, despite that roller coaster, they even gave us another scare in the last 20 seconds. When Brink scored to get it back to 1. And Bitchkoff got an almost point-blank bid to tie it in those weaning seconds. They escaped. We got the fourth best odds. And we can now take a breath and sigh of relief. We should have a good center on the way. But before we go into all that, before we go into a little bit of a season, what we could be looking at into the future and into draft season, we'll be going towards that later in the episode. We're going to talk about this whole season as a whole. It's been one hell of a roller coaster. So, Isaiah, you are our guest today. Let me lead off with you. What is pretty much your final thoughts on the season?
Well, in a lot of ways, it was the season that we thought it would be. There never is this perfect track of your expectations relative to what actually happens. It's almost impossible. Unless you're the 77 Canadians or something, you know, you're in the midst of a dynasty or something crazy. Of course, I would use that. You guys would probably use, Chicago or a team that was more contemporary. But nonetheless, they started out like a team that had not recovered from the swoon of the prior season.
Mm-hmm.
And you wondered, and we'll probably refer to this later, if the whole situation post trade deadline and Couturier and losing Walker and all that, and of course Carter Hart, and the damage, the scar tissue, if you will, from that was not still affecting them. And then they just kind of lifted themselves up and kind of became a very similar team to what they were last year in terms of the compete level, the dedication, the blocking shots. Still couldn't score in a power play. It was slightly better to start. Of course, the big conversation at the beginning of the year was Matvei Michkov. And this season, as much as anything, was seeing what he could be. Could he meet a certain expectation? And would Tortorella guide that properly? And that was a very important component of what we were looking for as we went into the season, and we monitored it very closely with the scratches and the lessons that coach was trying to teach this player that would serve him well 3, 4, 5 years down the road. And we also wanted to see what would happen with Sean Couturier. After what I talked about earlier with his benching and everything that went with it, we saw somewhat of a rebound from him. We saw TK break out on like a 40-goal pace and earn his way onto that, World Cup, the Four Nation tournament. Sanheim kind of did what, we thought he could be to kind of pick up, and he was better for longer than last year to have quite the fall off. And if you add it all up, it was good in a lot of ways, and a lot of the lessons Tortorella had instilled had stayed. But however, their goaltending was epically bad. They had the worst save percentage in the entire league. Their power play, 3 years in a row, was the worst. And this year, as we complete it and look back, it's still basically the worst. They were 30th, I think, this year instead of 32nd. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I think Danny Briere referenced it today. They went up, by 2.5 percentage points or something.
He called it a baby step.
Yeah,
I remember in his interview.
Yeah, I think that was a
polite.
baby. Yeah, that was a little baby belch, and that's all it was. And I could go, I could say more than that. The defense kind of took some steps back at a higher level if we're talking about York, but also we saw improvement with Drysdale. Very, very key. I remember being in Philly at the skate zone, watching the things that he was working on, and then seeing him implement them on the ice and during games, and seeing him get better. Is he where we want him to be and where we envisioned he would be, going forward? No, he has more work to do. But these were positives. But we saw a fallback in York, like I mentioned, and again, Risto was hurt, and he played some of his best hockey of the year. But now he's got another injury. We're not really sure if he might have something that's going to dog him the rest of the way. Yeah. And finally, the Cates line with Forster and Brink. Bobby Brink earned his Most Improved award, which I forget. What do they call that for the Flyers? Call that, he won the award.
I'm blanking on the name of it too, damn.
Yeah, I'm blanking on it. So anyway, he earned it. And, if it wasn't going to be him, it was Cates. But 2 years ago, Cates showed a little bit of what we saw this year. So I think Brink was the appropriate guy. And that line looks like it could be a third line going forward on a good team. And, if you go by their expected goals, their expected goals overall is pretty good. But that stat can leave you in some bad directions and lead you to bad conclusions. We saw that most of the year. So the bottom line is, when it really came to it, it came to Danny Briere. Am I going to try to improve what we have here, or am I going to basically do a mini tank? And at the end of the day, he did the right thing as a general manager. They gave us, they were the cardiac kids in that last game, like Eric, referred to, taking us through a total roller coaster. Because the one game came down to one game. I'm not a tank guy, but that guy I was rooting for. In that particular game, I'm rooting for him to lose. And they get that fourth chance, a fourth slot in the lottery, which you'll get into, I'm sure, later, actually gives them the greatest chance to get the 5th pick overall if you do the math. But we'll take it. It was the best of 2 scenarios that, and they optimized that. So it's where we're at. but it has to go up from here. And all indications are that that's where they see it. So they seem to be in concert with their fans, at least in that particular respect. I hope that's what you were looking for.
Isaiah, I have a little bit of a follow-up question for you based off of that. If you were in Danny's shoes right now and you had the option of two different directions, it would be try to stay low, embrace another season of suck and try to add maybe another good prospect, or make that step forward next season. If it was up to you, which path would you choose?
Well, I think that there's so much scar tissue from Tortorella and the way they've been kind of biding time. Mm-hmm. They've already hitched their wagon to Couturier. And I think they'll live to regret it, but that TK as well. And they have enough guys who have been through this process. They have to improve. They can't just tread water, or else I think mentally it could be so defeating and deflating that they could get to a place that we see what we saw in Ottawa and Arizona, come Utah for years, and Detroit and other places, and God forbid even Buffalo, because it just falls off a cliff after a while. These guys are not robots. They're all out there competing. They got to make a small step forward, small but significant.
Yeah. And that you make an interesting point. They are not robots. They're humans. You look into the big picture of things, and that starts to become a mentality that gets settled. I mean, look out in Chicago. I know he said otherwise and his end of season interviews, but look at Connor Bedard and just the outlook that he was having after 2 terrible years with the Blackhawks back-to-back years. I know he said the exact opposite in his end of the season interviews, but you're not fooling me. Wait, you got that mentality of consistently losing. It's only been 2 years there. When you're so used to having so much stagnant success for so long, now you're suddenly getting loss after loss after loss. They'll probably be bad again next year. I don't think Chicago's going to be a playoff team. That sets in that mentality, and you want to eventually probably avoid that. So that is a very good point. Eric, let me see your thoughts on the season.
Yeah, I'm going to give just a real quick little synopsis about the season. For me, it's lack of true elite talent coupled with subpar goaltending led to a fourth place finish. That's pretty much it. Yeah. Look, it's clear that like the center position on this team is lacking. It's extremely lacking. Like we have Sean Couturier. Yes, he's signed up long term, but like we've mentioned before, at this point in his career, he's probably best suited to be a 3C. Look, Ryan Poehling. Honestly, Poehling, I thought came on really hot towards the end of the season. Really stepped up after Lawton got traded. And but again, at the end of the day, he's him too, probably at best a 3C, but most probably a 4. Noah Cates, another player that like him too stepped up huge this year. But again, if he's a center, again at best 3C. Now, if you see there's like a little bit of like a trend here, but look, we have Luchenko coming. Possibly, what can he be? We'll see. Now we ended up with another high draft pick. Hopefully we can get a center. But I think we have the players necessary on the wings. Like we have, again, this is one of my things that went right this season. Tyson Forrester took another huge step. He ended up second on the team in goals. Bobby Brink took a huge step in his overall game, not just his scoring, but his overall game improved immensely. Mishkov, as a rookie, he led the team in goals, and even just he wasn't the number 1 on the team in points, but I think he was 2, if I'm not mistaken. So like we have some good, maybe not elite yet, but I think we have a couple guys that could end up being pretty elite players on the wing. It's just that the depth at center is so lacking that like it really, really hurts the offense and the transition game and moving the puck up and everything. So we'll see. And goaltending sank us this year. Like I don't look with the roster we had. I don't think we would have been. We would have maybe battled for a playoff if we would have got like league average goaltending. Unfortunately, we didn't. And look, they really, really hurt us this season. And look, Fedotov, like I personally, I like the guy. I really
complete
like
class act, complete classy
guy, honestly. And like, I don't think he's a bad goalie, but he's a backup. Like at best, he's a backup.
Yeah.
And Urson this year has been incredibly inconsistent. So you add that with lack of elite talent, you have what you have this year.
Mhm.
And look, this is pretty much what I expected coming into the season. I expected them to take a step back from last year. I thought last year they overachieved. A lot of their holes and were masked by pretty good goaltending last year, to tell you the truth. Um, but yeah, and then look, this year they took a step back. But again, as Flyers fans, we understand what they're going through right now. This is a rebuild. This is exactly what we're supposed to be expecting. So at the end of the day, yeah, look, it sucks that we ended up fourth, I guess. But like, well, yes and no, because we're gonna get a higher pick, so it's
True.
good. But no, but look, this is exactly what we signed up for, right? Like
Mhm.
and I know like a lot of Flyers fans don't want to hear that because it's like, oh, it's been like 15 years of, I look, I understand, but like what Hextall tried to do didn't work out. And then what Fletcher tried to fix didn't work out. So now they actually have to go into a rebuild. And
Mhm.
we never really rebuilt before, even with Hextall. Hextall's plan wasn't a rebuild.
Yeah.
It was just like a retool on the fly kind of deal.
Yeah.
So yeah, so look, that's what I see when we're right this season. That's what I see when wrong this season. Also, sorry, quick. Also, when we're wrong, like there's a couple players in Tippett and York that regressed,
Mhm.
so that didn't help either this year. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's pretty much how I saw the season unfold.
Very, very good breakdown. And I agree with a lot of what you said. So my take on this season, there's an old saying that I like to look at when it comes to evaluating a team and evaluating players. Or just in general in life, do not hold the players of today and the regime today accountable of the regime of the past and the
Mhm.
sins of the past. We knew this was going to be a tough season. Well, maybe not tough season, but we knew this was going to be a lengthy multi-year rebuild. Going far back is, you know, 2021, 22. And in my opinion, I put this on Twitter earlier this week. That was the low point of my Flyers fandom, was the 2021, 2022 season. That season was an absolute colossal catastrophe. And from there on out is when the switch kind of flipped for a rebuild, was that summer. Um, Obviously, now the person you drafted that summer didn't see to fruition, aka Mr. Kutaguchi out in Anaheim now, but you ended up with Jamie Drysdale, who looks like he is finally turning a corner. But anyway, to back onto this, I felt like this season, I wouldn't call it a failure, but I wouldn't call it a success either. But it was progression in terms of where this team needs to be for the future. There was a lot of massive negatives. The goaltending was the worst I've seen in my life. And that's saying something. There have been some bad years in that for this team. And we've even had a year we had 8 goalies playing the same season. And we had 3 goalies. And I want to pull this up real quick. I'm going to do a quick share screen. And on moneypuck.com, let me just show it right over here. On moneypuck.com, the Flyers had the worst goalie analytically. Samuel Larson, 19.9 goals below expected.
Mm.
Ivan Fedotov, 13.6 goals below expected. And a little bit lower at 13th was Alexei Kolosov, 9 goals below expected. He's lucky he was even that low, to be perfectly honest with you. With that being said, it was so catastrophic in net this season, there was no realistic chance this team could push for a playoff spot. None. Just because of that, there was only so much this team could do. But at the same time, I did see progression in a lot of guys. That entire second line for us, third line for most teams of Forster, Brink, and Cates was excellent. Excellent. That was, in my opinion, throughout the year, the most consistent line of the Flyers. All 3 of those guys took a step forward. Matvei Michkov coming overseas, adapting to the English language, adapting to the NHL, being thrown into a position he's never been in before with the marathon of the 82-game season that was the NHL season, and he soaked it up like a sponge. You know, he had his struggles mid-season. He had a point where he went like 7 games without a point. He had the 2 healthy scratches early in the year. We had talks around, I think, New Year's when, Matvei was struggling as well, that we thought he was going to get healthy scratch, I think, in that California road trip. And then he kind of turned a corner in that Kings game and leading into January. And then, once February, March, once the Four Nations break ended and he got his 2 weeks, he kind of found the gear he had at the beginning of the year again after having that opportunity to rest and recuperate, and he found his game again. Mind you, I think it took another step forward when John Tortorella was inevitably fired with 9 games to go, and that's just another crazy moment of this roller coaster season. I did not expect Tortorella to get fired after game 73 with the friction that happened between him and Cam York behind the scenes, but we'll get into that a little bit later. But Matvei had a lot of challenges this year, but he handled it very well, in my opinion. An 80-game, 63-point game, 26 goals, led all rookies, 37 assists. He fit in like a glove. And, the marathon of the NHL season, he had an opportunity to experience that. He had an opportunity to adjust. He had 2 different coaches to learn different types of styles, even if one of them was only for 9 games, and really get comfortable with the game. He's going over to Russia at the end of the year, as we heard in the pressers. I assume at some point in the summer he'll come back over, hopefully, and start training. I didn't officially hear that, but the fact that he mentioned that he wants to continue to improve his English, it makes me think that he will come over here at some point in the summer to continue his training in Voorhees. But I couldn't have been prouder of how good of a season he had. He met expectations and then some. I had him pegged in the mid-50-point range. He cracked 63, as I stated. He was great. He had his struggles, but I think this year is going to be an incredible learning experience of the marathon that is the NHL season. He will continue to get better. The power play continued to be atrocious. The first handful of games of the year, we thought maybe this team turned a corner, and it felt like when guys like Matvei learned the Rocky Thompson system that is the power play, it went catastrophic again once that original West Coast trip ended to begin the year. I know they went from 12 to 15%. That is still unacceptable. That there is enough talent for this team to take another step forward. That was just a massive, massive letdown again this season. The penalty kill took a little bit of a step back, but I still think it was good enough. They weren't the power kill that they were last year. You knew that wasn't sustainable. You weren't going to get 16 short-handed goals in a season from this team, but I thought the penalty kill was acceptable. I love the progression of some of the defensemen that they had. Jamey Drysdale took a step forward. Rasmus Ristolainen, for when he was healthy, continued to show consistency of being that physical defenseman that this team has longed for. Cam York had his struggles. How much that had to do with Tortorella and himself, we'll probably find that out maybe next year if he's still here. Nick Seeler continued to be the shot blocking machine that we love and know. He was great. Konechny, I consider as a tale of 2 halves. Great first half, kind of a conservative second half. He did put up 76 points. It is a career high, so that is something to congratulate. So good on TK. But the fact that he only had 4 goals in the second half of the year, and it was not because of injury per what he stated, is a little concerning to me. I hope he learns to manage his play because he kind of blamed it on emptying the tank, and he kind of felt that fatigue factor hit around the Four Nations. Hopefully he learns from this and kind of paces himself throughout the year. Obviously, you do want to give effort every night, but it's a marathon, not a sprint, as I've stated with the season. So overall, in the big picture of the season, I consider it progression, but there were a lot of failures too at the same time. It was an up and down year. It wasn't the catastrophe that we had when this rebuild began at the end of 2021-22, because that was the last time they had the 4th worst record in the league. They had 76 points. They there were things that we can look at in a positive progression. They have a lot of 3Cs, and I think there's going to be at least 3 or 4 players on this current roster right now that won't be here next year. I don't know who yet. We'll see as the year goes on. I think there will be some major differences in next year. The coaching hire is going to have something to do with that and how they take the next step forward. Hopefully Rocky Thompson is out of a job soon. That'll probably happen when whoever the new coach is. Because with all due respect to him, I want him nowhere near this team when the next coaching staff takes over. I give my praise to Brad Shaw. He did an excellent job with the D-corps and the penalty kill. I hope he stays within the organization to some degree, whether he's the next head coach and they do their due diligence, or he stays as a defensive coach and the next guy ends up wanting to welcome him with open arms. If it's not him, we'll see. But I got to give my respect to Brad Shaw as he continues to be a beacon of light for this defense corps. And that's it. And Alexei Kolosov, I think we need to, as we mentioned last week, Eric, I think it's time to snip the cord on that experiment. But yeah, is there anything else we want to add for some potential positives and negatives throughout the year?
Yeah, I don't know if I really got into what went right, what went wrong, or I got confused a little bit. No, that's not it. We were talking about 3 things that went right and 3 things that went wrong, maybe.
Yeah, it's pretty much the 3 things is pretty much going to be our biggest positives and negatives for individual players on the year. But what went right, what went wrong is more just a general perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I had Matt Bay, the Cates line, everybody on that line, progress, and Drysdale's progress, which
absolutely,
and players like that, and Tortorella's recovery in the first part of the season, where it looked like I think he might have lost some last year, and that was a good thing. But on the negative side of the ledger, the goaltending, the power play, and then the crash and burn of Tortorella at the very end was probably good in the long term, but during the season, it was pretty nasty.
Yeah. And it makes you wonder if that maybe he even started losing the room. He most likely did to some degree when you have that much consistent losing 11 of 12 games before his inevitable departure. And then obviously how things are handled with him in York. I'm sure some stuff was said that would probably want to be rescinded now looking back a month later. But yeah, it was in the long term. I will say I think his message of accountability is going to be valued, because this is something this team did not have when he first came here. They got rid of a lot of the bad eggs, and this team still feels like a much healthier locker room than it was 3 years ago before he came here. But I think his message was growing stale, and his overlooking hard work and beating the ever-loving crap out of you with his message and blocking shots and even a little bit of hypocrisy with his message as well. So
2 things, if I could.
Yeah.
1, if he's telling the guys to block shots and play the way he plays, constant compete, and then after the trade deadline, he's the one sulking. And he does it more or less. People were saying that he basically wanted to get fired. It does seem like that. He's not stupid, right? Saying what he said and all that. Okay. So that's one. That's certainly a negative. But 2, I always want to give him credit. He is the most important and most significant driver of the rebuild in the organization. But you remember December of 22, he was really the only one saying that. Chuck Fletcher's out there saying, well, we're only 5 points out of a playoff spot. I mean, that was absolute bullshit. So, and it took Tortorella to slap him across the face verbally in a manner of speaking, to drag them in the reality of they need a rebuild, and that's why we're where we're at today. So give him credit for that much.
Yes. And, like I said, he did his job here. He did his job. There have been much worse coaches that have come through this door in the last 15, 20 years. I thank Torts for what he did. I think his message will be valued at the end of the day when it comes to, at least in terms of accountability. I do think, as we mentioned, his message grew stale. And I will say out of his 3 years here, this is probably the year I think he did the worst job. But as a whole, I think his message was received well. His message of accountability received well. And I think the players will take that with them going forward. So I thank him for that, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Eric, anything else you want to add before we move on?
No, I just want to add on quick on Torts. The thing with Torts this year, it was just I was very disappointed in him. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's because I always liked Torts as a coach.
Mm-hmm.
I understand, like, he's a hard guy and whatever, and like I get it. But at the end of the day, like Isaiah said, like he did convince this team, like, guys, you're fooling yourselves, like, if you don't think you have to rebuild. And like the first 2 years that he was here, I think he really did do a really good job setting in a culture and setting in the standards and everything that he did. But like, and I thought he started the year pretty well this year too. He was okay, but there was a couple of things but you saw like the cracks a little bit, like starting, and same thing, like Isaiah said, it's like for a guy that like preached accountability and everything, and then he's the one that seemed like if it started either at the trade deadline or even a little bit before the trade deadline, I think it really started like when they traded Farabee and Frost, and where it's like it seemed like he was disinterested, or maybe not disinterested is not the right word, but not happy, and like, but at the end of the day, like you knew what you were getting into in a way, and it's like I think like one more full, like, honestly, I thought, like, I think I even said on the show, I thought he was coming back next year. But then after, when you started hearing everything that started coming out about him and everything, you're like, yeah, there was no way they were keeping this. Like, there was no way in hell. And yeah, like, look, they fired him with like 9 games. Like, to fire like someone like Torts with 9 games remaining in the season or whatever it was, like something had to have happened, like something bad, because you let that guy finish the season. Like, you let a guy with his tenure and with his experience and everything, you let him finish the season. So, like, things must have gotten so bad that you had to fire this guy with 9 games. And so that's why with Torres, I'm just very disappointed the way things finished.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, and you're right that something massive did happen. But it is what it is. Unfortunately, we move on. But let's move on to our next topic. So, our favorite and least favorite moment of the year. So there's a lot of things we can look at in this season in a big picture, but let's kind of minimize it to a smaller perspective. So let's start from the negative moment of the year, and then we'll work our way to the positives. I have a feeling we're going to have a pretty similar answer on the positive answer. But let's start with the negative. We'll go in a little different perspective. Isaiah, let's start with you. What was your least favorite moment of the year?
Well, I mean, it's what myself and even more so Eric was expounding upon, the post trade deadline swoon, just the whole milieu, and it just looked like the air was totally taken out of him, especially when Lawton left, and the way he refused to use Peltier like a spoiled child as a coach, and I mean, you just don't do stuff like that. And it was such a downer. And like, yeah, they're headed toward a better pick, but you can't go out this way. It's almost like you're taking an eraser and you're going over the entire culture and all the lessons they're supposed to learn that he was trying to impart to them, and you're undoing it. And he was part of that. And that, to me, was the biggest bummer. And that's when I'm looking at the game, and I've done this many years, and it's you're watching a game, and I always watch it on a delay. That's the way I've been doing it for a while. And you hit fast forward. I can't watch this. This is crap. I'm not watching this crap. Fast forward. Come on, show me something. And I'm fast forwarding the whole time. And that's what I'm doing. When it gets to that point and you have a string of games like that, like we're back in 21, 22, that was a bummer. I was like, no, I'm not up for this. And it was a bummer, but they recovered,
Yeah, that's a very, very fair point. Honestly, you're absolutely right. Like, it was, when you go into that perspective, you sell off the guys that you sold, and towards the way he handled himself, the team loses 11 of 12, and suddenly they can't hit a cow in the ass with a shovel. I am going to go with, I had a few choices on this one, but I'm going to say Motvay's 7-game slump, because I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I had a point in the season where I was really pushing the Motvay for Calder thing, because I really wanted to see it. because I knew it was a battle between him, Hudson, Celebrini. Wolf came into the picture. Stankoven was there earlier in the year, and I thought he was going to potentially run away with it. Then he had that 7-game rut where he just was stuck in his head, and I started getting worried too. Like, is this going to be like something that just becomes a ripple effect on him that fucks with him long term? And then you have a guy like Torts who's such a hard ass that is going to make things worse for him too. And then maybe the potential healthy scratch coming in that West Coast road trip in California. That was more overthinking it probably. Now looking at the big picture, actually definitely was. But I think that was when the reality set in that the chance of him winning the Calder was really going to be slim unless if he had a massive second half. And he did have another rut too in like February that kind of held him back as well. So the Montve ruts kind of were a little discouraging because that was my primary focus on the whole year. And I wanted to see him become the first Flyer to ever win the Calder. That's likely not happening. He'll probably, I don't even know if he's going to be a finalist. It's going to be close between him and Wolf probably for the last spot. But I would have really liked to see him push for the Calder. Unfortunately, he's not going to get it. Not to his fault. He had a fantastic year over in a Cosmo, but it was such a stacked rookie class. You had 4 incredible rookies, and that little hole kind of ended it, unfortunately. Eric, what's your pick?
Well, there was 2 I was like kind of like debating, and the one I didn't go with because we've talked it to fucking death at this point. Kolosov. No so way. I'm like, you know what? I'm not touching that again because I'm fed up now. So no, I'm going with basically all the benchings this season. Look, I got personally affected because he got benched for that Florida trip where he got benched against the Tampa Bay. Yeah. Mishkov got benched against Tampa Bay, and then I was at the Florida game in Florida, and then he got benched again. So that really pissed me off. I was like, I flew all the way to Florida to watch Mishkov. Doesn't even play. Yeah. But a little side note, I ended up going to Ottawa last Sunday, so I watched him there. So at least I got to watch him at least once live this year. But that, and also coupled with what I really, really pissed me off, and I don't like when coaches do this, is when you bench a player for more than a period. Like, if you're going to bench a guy for a few shifts, maybe like a period, fine. But when you start benching guys for like a whole game, like pretty much like with York and what happened to York and Mishkov this year, I that bothers me. I don't like when coaches do that. I don't think it's right. You're just embarrassing a player at that point, and that's how you start losing your room. That's how you start losing your players. Like I said, you want to bench the guy for a few shifts and you explain to him why he's being benched and everything, that's fine. But like when you start benching him for periods, and especially when like you have a defense that, I think it was the York game, if I'm not mistaken, it was after a back-to-back or like 3 and 4, something like that. And like you have these guys that are battling for you, absolutely battling for you. And then you bench one of your biggest minute eaters, one of your best shot blockers and everything. And you're like, no, you guys go do it. He's sitting there. For like, and where it seems like look, I understand York had a down year. I understand. And maybe he wasn't having his best game. But come on, you're coming in to tell me that Zamula was playing better than York that game? No. I'm sorry. No. So like things like that they really bother me. And that was probably the way he handled some of those benchings. And then I couldn't remember, please guys, help me out. The Farabee benching when he basically benched him the whole game. Was that last year or was that this year?
That was last year. That was that game against New Jersey. He played one shift, allowed a goal, and then they didn't play him again.
Okay, that was last year. Okay, so like again, Torts is not new to this, and it happened again twice. And the worst part was after the Mishkov benching, he even said in a press conference that, yeah, I think I made a mistake. I should not have benched him for more than a period. And then he does it like about a month later to York. Like it makes no sense. That's it. No, that's really what I didn't like.
It just sounds hypocritical when you do that. And exactly. Like you're the smartest guy in the room type of thing. And that goes back to my point that I think this was Tortorella's worst year out of the 3 years as the head coach. Even if he didn't get fired and they finished the year, 2023, I can say he They took the level of accountability, and they became a likable team again. 2024, they made the playoff push. Even though this year they had more points in 2023, they kind of, you could see the chinks in the armor prior to it. So that's that. Now let's move into a positive perspective. I have a feeling we're all going to have the same answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Eric, let me start with you. What was your favorite moment of the year?
Well, when I was going through this, I kind of figured everyone would. Well, at least you, Alex, for sure.
Well, you know what I'm going to pick. You know exactly what I'm picking.
You know what? That's all right. So you know what? I'm not gonna touch that one. So this was tough because I'm like, oh man, what positives? So I'm like, oh, do I go with like maybe like Mishkov, like because like he ended up leading he ended up leading the team in goals, and look, Calder, he's in contention for the Calder. I think I'd have him too. I'd have him ahead of Celebrini. Personally, I have him ahead of Celebrini. So what I went with is, because this is so up my alley, is my favorite part of this season was the Gritty and Lawton Sears photo shoot. that was iconic. That was beautiful. It was completely absurd, and I loved it. I wish, and I don't know if they did, but I couldn't find it if they did. But I would have loved if they would have made that into a calendar. And sold a calendar of that, because I would have bought it. Like, I don't care. Like that.
That's how you market.
Please take it. Like, I would have loved to have a calendar.
That's how you market your players, is funny shit like that. Because Gritty used to have that whole thing with him and Claude Giroux as his BFF. I think Lawton kind of took over that role after he left. So that is a funny little fun thing to look at as a little marketing tool.
That's it. That's basically that's probably my favorite part.
How about you, Isaiah? What was your pick?
Well, it has to be the one game during the year that felt like we're in a Wayback Machine, and the excitement was so palpable. I'd say only rivaled by the Buffalo game that we just went through. In terms of it, just not knowing the roller coaster element, but this was not any roller coaster. This was a slobber knocker that we laid down to the Anaheim Ducks when Cutter Gauthier came to town, and the Flyers dominated every friggin' second of it. And it's just like there was life in the building, and everybody was like, boy, this is what Flyers hockey used to be, when they used to kick the ass, and they used to do it like of good teams, not just bottom feeders like Anaheim. Well, it was, maybe not anymore, but yeah, in that moment, on that night, it was most fun to be a Flyers fan, and by far and away the best moment of the year for me.
So I 100% wholeheartedly agree, because that's my obvious pick too. I want to give an honorable mention before I give my little breakdown of it, because me and Eric ended up doing a live stream of that game. We had to take advantage of it, and we had a fucking blast with it, because it was great. Every second that kid stepped on the ice, the fans eviscerated him with boos, and it just showed, listen, it's a sleeping giant of a fan base. They're waiting for this team to be good again. They're waiting for them to be competitive, pushing for Stanley Cups again, all the way up until 2012, year after year after year. Because from 2013 on, that aura kind of went out the window. They still made the playoffs occasionally, but that's when the every year losing in the first run, middle of the pack bullshit began. But you felt something that you felt in 2010, back in 2008, when they had the year from hell and then made it back to the Eastern Conference Finals. 2004, in that incredible series at the Tampa Bay Lightning when Keith Primo ties the game in that Game 6. That was one of the loudest moments I ever heard in the Farg. Well, not called the Farg then, but obviously 2012 when Claude Giroux had the shift and Zance Crosby in Game 6. Moments like that, you felt like, as you mentioned, you were in the Wayback Machine, and they completely dominated the night. Jamie Drysdale got a goal, getting the Jamie's better chant late in the first period. Matvey Michkov gets a goal. They pour it on in the third period. That fraud goes into hiding, and he sees like 1 or 2 shifts that entire period because they know they can't feed him to the Wolves anymore because they're getting their ass kicked. He's getting his ass kicked. TK literally just went up to him and said, I will fucking beat your ass. I was like, that's awesome. I felt the friggin' energy all night. It was the best night of the year, unquestioned. But to give an honorable mention as a best moment of the year, I've been high on one particular player for quite some time, and I think Eric knows which player I'm going to be pointing at. I love the progression of Tyson Forster this year. 25 goals. This kid, I think, is the only one in that Brink, Cates, Forster line that has a ceiling much higher than the other two. I think, and one of the big weaknesses about the Philadelphia Flyers that isn't mentioned enough is the fact that they do not have a natural left winger in the top 6. And Tyson Forster, while he is considered more of a natural right winger, he played on the left side all year and he felt comfortable all year. And I think he's a guy you can eventually insert into your top 6 when he hits his prime with confidence that he can do that. He had another slow start to the year, but once he found his game, he took off. He had 9 goals in the final 9 games. Now, was that all to do with the John Tortorella termination? Maybe a little bit. I don't know. Probably had to do somewhat with it because he got to play a little more freely, but he felt confident in his game. And you kind of saw it in the second half, too. I think he had 33 points last year. I think he had, 43 this year? 42?
43, right. Yeah.
43. So he took a step forward. He went from 20 to 25 goals. He went from 13 to 17 assists. This is a guy you look at that could be a future 30-plus goal guy for you if he could take the step forward at the beginning of the year, something he himself mentioned in the press conference. And the one thing I love about him is when he was talking in that press conference, one, he's honest. He came out and said, listen, there's going to be mistakes throughout the year. We're not going to bitch about anything that happens. We're going to have each other's backs. And number 2, he's honest about his own game. And he's self-critical and he knows things that he needs to work on. That was a great evaluation he gave on himself. One thing that Owen Tippett does so well is how he can beat players one-on-one. And that's something he wants to develop in his game. And he's a big body. I mentioned this to Eric, I think maybe last week's episode. We called it Tyson Forster Punch-Out. It was a little callback to Mike Tyson Punch-Out game. And one thing about Tyson Forster's game that stands out that I didn't really realize is how big of a body he was. He's the same size as Jake Voracek. I think Voracek's shoulders are a little bit bigger. That maybe makes him look a little bigger than he actually is. But he's a real big body, and he's a physical left winger that plays a good two-way game that could really take a step forward for you in the future. I think he's a legit top 6 piece for this team in the future. It's not just the now, it's what he could give you further down the line. And a good goal could be 30 goals for him and maybe over 50 points next year. And at that point, you had the discussion, how much of a future second line guy is this? We're going to talk about signings a little bit more later in the show. But out of the 4 RFAs I have this year, he's the one that I prioritize the most, and he's the one that I believe that deserves a long-term extension. Even if it gives you a little bit less money to work with in this offseason, I think it's something that you won't regret later on because he could be playing himself into a much bigger contract if he continues his level of progression. I know the fan base or the front office may have a little bit of Joel Farabee PTSD after giving him a long-term deal as quick as they did. But I see more in Forster than I did in Farabee because I believe that Forster has more of a two-way game. He brings the physical element that this team is sincerely lacking. He's got a great shot, and he wants to expand his game more when it comes to having that ability to potentially beat off of guys on one-on-one and maybe break out more of a star than we could actually potentially see him be. Is he going to ever be a superstar? Probably not. But could he be a contributing top 6 guy for the longevity of his career here for the next 7-8 years? I think so. I think you have a lot of untapped potential in Tyson. I've always loved his game, and I think we're just starting to scratch the surface of it. But does anyone else have anything else to add before we move on to the next segment of our season breakdown?
No, I'm good.
Well, good.
All right. So with that being said, Let's go a little more in depth about the individual players of the year. So, what I kind of did some letter grading. I only did kind of like the priority guys. Um, you don't have to go in depth with that too. I'm going to kind of give a little bit of a read off with that real quick. But more primarily, I want to talk about the three maybe most improved or biggest step forward guys, and the three guys who kind of took or even if you want to take a group as a whole, that took a step back. I did a couple gradings. I gave Mitchkoff an A for the year. I think he absolutely deserves it. I give Konechny and Forrester both A minuses because I think Konechny did take a step forward. He kind of took that step back from a goal scoring perspective, but he did have a career high in points. So I think he deserves at least the recognition that he did. And then Forrester really looks like a potential guy, as I just mentioned, that can fit your future in the top six. I gave Bobby Brink a B+. I think he was probably the most improved Flyer. I saw someone on Twitter, it was one of the Anthonys, I'm blanking on which one, that called him potentially Cam Atkinson Jr. And it made me stop and think, could he develop into something like that? That's high praise. I don't know if you're going to get quite that because Atkinson hit 40 goals before in his prime.
Yeah.
But you could get a guy that has a style similar to him. I don't know if you can get 70 to 75% of Atkinson in his prime, I think that's a home run. I don't think Bobby Brink will ever become that. But if you get a guy who can maybe be on your third line, that could be a 45-plus point guy, 50, maybe even crack 50 here and there every year when he hits his prime, that could be something that could be much of value in the long term. So give Brink his flowers. I gave a handful of Bs. I put Lawton in this because he was here the majority of the years. I did not include Frost and Farabee because they were here 1 month less, so I kind of cut them out of it. I gave Coots, Cates, Sanheim, and Lawton Bs. I think they both had good years, kind of lived up to where you wanted them or even maybe a little bit more. I gave Jamey Drysdale a B+ too, because that second half of the year, he took a massive step forward, at least in the defensive perspective of the game. And I think offensively, he broke out a little bit in that final month as well. So it gives you a little bit of confidence. I'd love to see him on the first power play unit to begin the year next year. Hopefully when you have a better power play coach so he can feel a little more confident there. And then the only other guy I gave Bs to, I gave Paling a B and Hathaway and Risto a B-. Risto, with the injury, I kind of had to put him down a little bit. I know he was consistent all year. But again, the big problems with Risto continues to be his durability. He's always hurt. And as you mentioned, Isaiah, in Danny's presser, he just had surgery. I believe it was on his arm.
Same arm, yeah. Same tricep, yeah.
Lead into next year. He might miss games early next season too.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So I don't think you're going to probably be able to move this guy for that reason. At least not right away. Maybe towards the deadline when the price won't be as drastic and you won't have much term on him anymore. And the teams that didn't want to buy on him were right yet again that he just can't stay healthy, unfortunately, for the longevity of the season. But those are the positive letter grades I gave. Three. So let's start with our three positives of the year. Did anyone else do letter grades for their players, by the way?
No. I usually go with the met, exceeded, or fell below expectation, kind of deal.
So Isaiah, let me let you start this one. Who were some players that exceeded or met expectations in general perspective, and then maybe your top three?
Oh, well, I mean, Brink, Cates, and Mitchkoff exceeded expectations. I mean, I had Mitchkoff at like 21 goals, 51 points. So, he had 26 goals and 63 points. Mm-hmm. And he probably should have had more if they had any kind of power play. He's into the 70s, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, Cates kind of became a better version of the guy he was 2 years ago. So he was a more complete all-around player. And it looks like durably he'll be a really a pretty good 3C, and it would be a really dynamite player in your bottom six in general. And Bobby Brink improved his skating dramatically, improved his strength dramatically, and literally learned how to check. When he was told last year, he literally doesn't know how to check at all. So that is a tremendous accomplishment. You can only do that through hard work and dedication. So those three stand out as the biggest positives for me. I would give an honorable mention to Jamey Drysdale in that to me, he met the expectation I had for him, and that he made that leap that was needed for us to have faith that he'll get there. And remembering that it's easier for Cutter Gauthier to get 20 goals in his rookie year at his stage of the game than it is for a defenseman to not get lost and overwhelmed, especially a guy his size, learning how to take advantage of his speed, his offensive instincts, and everything that goes with his game. So he's definitely that trade. They'll probably lose that trade, but maybe not by the margin that people thought maybe originally. So that's an honorable mention. In terms of disappointments, Owen Tippett. Owen Tippett should be a 30-goal scorer. He's got to. I mean, we saw the Buffalo game, right? And I'm watching Tage Thompson, and what separates him and gets him into the 40-goal plateau is ability. His puck skills are so much better. His release is fantastic. It's like he has an elite release. That means it's among the best in the entire league. And this is why he's at the top of the goal scoring charts. If either Forster, my one criticism of his game, or Tippett ever want to get into that 30-goal plateau more, more consistently, they're going to have to improve the release. And that I think that hurts Tippett. They just wait too long, and it takes them too long to gather the puck and get a shot off. And you compare that to the best guys in the league. If it could just cut, the margin between what Thompson is able to do or a guy like Pasternak, okay, those are the best guys. But can you get closer along a continuum of achievement and do a better job? If they can, then they will break the 30-goal plateau. To me, that's the biggest thing. Got to work on that shot, release, puck skills in general. So Tippett was, a disappointment. Samuel Ursak, he says he was hurt most of the year and he didn't feel like himself until the last 2 weeks. Well, then he's clearly, he's always hurt or tired or something. He's clearly just a backup. And I was hoping, based on what he did last year in a combo situation with Hart, that he could be maybe a little more. I don't think it's going to happen, but if it does, it's going to take longer than they probably are willing to wait. So it's okay to have him as like a 1B, a tandem guy, but I mean, the save percentage speaks for itself. Yeah. He was put in the bad spots, but personally, I if you look at the expected goals of the Flyers in the entire league, again, this can be a misleading stat. I understand, but they're like 7th in the entire league. So I thought they've had some games where their defense was awful and they left the goalies hung out to dry. Sure. The fact of the matter is there was a bad goal on average, probably more than one bad goal every game. So had to hit the cough button there. So
I know that feeling.
Yeah, it's been bad. It's been bad. And then Cam York, what a come down from last year. I think Torts got inside of his head, and he took a hit on the island, and he hasn't been quite the same player. But I wasn't happy overall with his play. I don't think he's assertive enough offensively, and he's going through his phases. Maybe the next coach can really unlock him.
Yeah. And you make a good point. That was one of the things that made him so valuable when he was on Team USA is he was a driving force defensively on those teams. And it's one of the things that he has not been able to unlock in the pro game yet is having a consistent offensive game. When they had Shane Goss's here back so long ago, that was his biggest key. He found that offensive game like that. Now, mind you, he was a lot more of an offensive defenseman. He had no defensive game, unlike Cam York, who is a lock-in. So it takes a little bit of time for some guys. I want to see York, hopefully, whoever the next coach is, whether it's Brad Shaw, maybe someone from outside the organization, whether it's a college or former NHL guy, we'll see. But I do want to see Cam York hopefully push for more of an offensive game and be a little more aggressive offensively. He doesn't usually make mistakes, which is one thing that I like about him. But this year, it was just he felt like very unlike himself. Like you mentioned, he was dealing with injuries. So I don't know how much, but we'll get into that probably a little more as the summer goes on, and hopefully the next guy can unlock that. Eric, how about you?
Well, for me, my positive players, the three positives I have, I tried to go a little bit outside the box. I didn't want like to start to become redundant with everybody else, so I'm gonna go with Couturier. My first one is actually gonna be Coots. Like we said, also look, we know what Coots is at this point of the season, but at the end of the day, at least from what he showed me this year, is that he can still play. He can still he can still play. He's still very good defensively. He can still put up some decent points. Like, look,
he still got it here.
Yeah, exactly. But look, he put up 45 points this season. Okay, like it's not great, but it look, it's not terrible either. And I know, like, look, I know plus minus isn't like, the greatest of stats or whatever, but like when you're one of only 5 players on the team that like regulars on the team that was in the pluses, I'm sorry, that says something to me. Okay, like he was okay, like he was only a +1, but still he was in the pluses. Only Sealer at +10, Hathaway at +5, Cates at +3, and Rizzo at +3. Those are your only positive players this season in plus minus. And look, he finished the season in his last 28 games with 21 points. So if you take it into account that, maybe also like, because if I'm not mistaken, right, he had surgery before the season started, or in the last off season.
Yeah.
Exactly. So like, take into account that, he's still recuperating. Plus, he's still coming from the backs. What I like is that he finished the season strong.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that he finished the season strong and going into
last year was quite the opposite too. He fell off a cliff in the second half of the year.
Exactly, right? And we all knew there was something wrong with him last year. Yeah. And then he said, you saw it at the end of the year, I have this, I have that, I have this, and he had to get surgery and whatnot, and blah, blah, blah. So just the fact that he came on strong at the end of the season, for me, is a big positive going into next year. Because you know what? If let's say this trend of him going like his season, his points or whatever going back up, if he can turn into like a 55 to 60 point player next year, at least that's it's a step in the right direction. So, and he's still, like we said, he's still one of those. He's a super intelligent player. He's still one of the best defensively in the league. So that he was one of my big positives this year. My second biggest positive is basically Kuz Jr. and Noah Cates. Like coming from he struggled a little bit last season, and coming into this season, then he was benched for the first couple of games for Luchenko. So you're like, okay, well, does this guy still have a place on this team? We have Lawton, so like, where does he fit? And then you know what? They put him back at center, and he just took off. And like we said, that Forrester, Cates, and Brink line was probably one of our best and most consistent lines pretty much all year. At one point, they were our first line. Basically, at one point, they were our first line. True. Until basically they put Coots with Mishkov and TK. But up until then, they were pretty much the Flyers' first line. And look, they were doing an admirable job. And you saw their production start to dip a bit after a while, but like it's only normal. Like once you start getting the number one competition against you, like your points are gonna dry up a little bit. But still, he finished with 37 points for the season. That's pretty good for him. And if he does stick at center, he has to work on his faceoffs. He was only at 44.6 on the season, so that's definitely something that he would have to work on. To be totally honest with you, I think they might next season, depending on what they do in the offseason, I think they might actually move him back to wing, depending, at least for the short term, to see like whatever, depending on what happens. So he was 2, sorry, and 3. I'm gonna go. You know what? I'm gonna go with Peltier, because you know what, like he was part of basically a major, well, you could say a major-ish trade that happened this season for the Flyers. He was, for me personally, he was the major piece that we got back in the Farabee and Frost trade.
Yeah.
So look, he struggled, and he said in his press conference, he goes, "Look, I wasn't playing my best the first 10 games I was here. I wasn't." And I guess you know what, you just got traded from the only place you've known in the NHL. Then you come to a new team. You're getting accustomed to the your teammates and everything. And look, and to Torts too, right? He was getting accustomed to Torts.
Yeah, no kidding. You get thrown right into a tire fire.
Exactly, right. And like Torts didn't always have the best comments about. I don't know what this guy is. I don't know if he's a scorer or he's a checker. I don't know.
Listen, he's compared Morgan Frost to a toilet seat. That should be all you need to know.
Exactly. So look, he had a little stretch there towards the end of the season where he had 6 points in 7 games. He finished with 8 points in 25 games, but like I like his spunkiness. I like his aggression. I like he's a small guy, but he goes after that puck. He goes into the corners, and so I really like what I saw from him, and I feel like he does have a place on this team. So yeah, so he's my third positive of the year for yeah.
What are your 3 negatives?
Negatives. This is where it becomes a bit redundant.
Yeah, I know, but you gotta do it.
I have to do it. Linked with Pelletier, I'm gonna go with this one. And I know, look, they're not on the team anymore, but Frost and Farabee, I'm gonna package them together. Frost and Farabee. Going into the season, Frost really had to show that he was gonna be, he could really be like a number 2 center. At the very least, like show that he could do something. And Farabee had to show that he could find his game again. Unfortunately, look, for both, it didn't work out. Frost was as inconsistent as he's always been. He's the epitome of inconsistency. That's basically what he is. And Farabee, look, we all know the story of Farabee. With like he had 20 goals or like what is his second year of his career and everything, and even his third year, he was on pace for 20 again, and then he just hits then he got hurt. He had the shoulder, and then in the offseason, he had the disc replacement surgery because when he got hurt, and he had that terrible first year under Torts. But then you saw it that second year, like when he had
the first 2/3 of it,
the first 2/3 of the season, he was on fire. Like, okay, this is the guy. And then the guy just hit a wall for whatever reason. Just hit
in his last 115 games played, dating back to game 48 of last year, Joel Farabee has 35 points. It's crazy. I love the kid. I want to see him succeed so bad. I've mentioned this a million times on the show. I have always been a pro Joel Farabee person because he's a great guy on and off the ice. But at what point do you have to look and say, is this what he is? I saw a report that, he had all these high danger chances with the Flames. You got to eventually convert, though.
Yeah, he had 6 points in 31 games for them.
Yeah, I don't know.
Stinks.
It's so weird.
That's fourth line production. That's not even third. 115 games, your last 115 games, you have 35 points. That's not that's fourth line numbers.
Oh, it is 100%. And that's this is gonna have to be some kind of like one of these interesting studies that someone's gonna do a few years down the line. Like, what the hell happened? Like,
it's like Steve Sachs or Steve Blass syndrome. Steve Sachs was he a second baseman for the Dodgers? He literally couldn't throw from second to first. It got into his head.
Might be before my time.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Steve Blass definitely before your time. As a pitcher, he was the dominant pitcher for the Pirates, and they were a world championship team. A couple of years later, it's like he couldn't throw the ball to home plate. He lost his control. That's it.
Yeah, just really, really weird. So yeah, so that's one. 2, obviously Tippett. Like, look, I don't know what if like something got into that kid's head this year or something, but like he only took 188 shots this year compared to his 289 from
he went down like 60 shots or something like that.
He was down 101 shots from last year. He had 289 shots last year.
I didn't know it was that much.
He only played one more game last year. He played, I think, 78 games last year. He played 77 this year.
That's okay. He could have got 101 shots his last game. That's misleading.
So that's one. Okay. 2, he has zero power play goals this season. None.
That doesn't surprise me with how atrocious this damn power play was all year.
And that release, man.
Yeah. His shooting percentage didn't really change too much. He was shooting at 10.6, so whatever. But this one is interesting, and this one, Alex, I think you're gonna love this one because this one is like goes to your like whole like plexiglass Punisher thing.
Oh,
Okay,
God. I don't take
shots.
credit for that one. That's suitable, Elias.
His shots through percentage was down almost 10% this year. Okay, that's shots that the shots you take that actually go on net.
He
He
can't
was at
hit the net.
44.3 this
That's his
season.
issue.
Okay. He was at 44.3 this season. He was at 53.1 last year and 55.8 the year before. So he was getting
can't
shots
hit
through
the
at least the
net.
majority. But now this year, like his numbers and everything that his numbers that should be good just went completely down this year. So look, I think it's just an off year. I think a lot of stuff was getting into his
I
head
agree.
or whatever that maybe like I don't know,
I hope.
he seems like maybe he was passing up on shots that he's like, oh, I don't know if I'm gonna get on that, so let me. I don't know.
It may have been in his head at some point. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this offseason he really needs to like focus up, man. Do yoga, do something.
Mhm.
I don't know. Go meditate. I don't know what you got to do, buddy. But like you got to come back level headed
Mind your
next
inner
year and
peace.
like you know. Okay, so that's 2 and 3. It's Urson, man. Like I really needed to see this year. I really needed to see Urson to at least show me that he could be a capable, not maybe top of the league, but at least middle of the pack or low end starter. And honestly, he didn't. I mean, whether if it was injuries or what, I don't know. But now it's starting to become a trend where it's like even last year, look, the workload got too much for him. And granted, like they torch fucking played him into the ground last year, so
Yeah.
can't
So I
really
don't
blame
blame
him.
him at all last year. It was unforeseen circumstances.
But
So
you know, like you mentioned earlier, he had a minus 19.6 goals saved above expected. That's awful. That
it was
is
the worst in the league.
awful. Exactly. He had an 883 save percentage and a 314 goals against average. Just to say, okay, league average this year, the league average save percentage was 900. Okay.
Down year for goals.
28 times this year out of 47 games, he had a save percentage under league average. That's that you like. I'm sorry. That's again. That's backup to like not a great backup numbers. Like
Yeah.
he's definitely got to like figure things out this offseason. Him too, and because like look, like I said, this season so far he did not show me that he could be at the very least a low end starter. Right now, in my opinion, tandem to backup. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But yeah, he's got to fix him and Tippett, man. They got to fix their games.
Yeah, Urson would be an average goalie in the 80s with those numbers.
Yeah, exactly.
The better
Back of a
equipment, the
Wayne
better
Gretzky.
coaching, the techniques, everything, still be average.
So I'm going to do this. My top 3 I'll go as this. My number 3 I give to Jamey Drysdale. And I want to give before I get, actually, I kind of jumped the gun a little bit. My honorable mentions. Number 1 is Sean Couturier. I think he deserves it. He took, he dealt with a lot of shit last year. You already heard it from him in the press conference where he said him and Torts didn't really have much of a relationship. And, he was obviously battling with all these injuries. He's got the 2 back surgeries. He had his own core muscle surgery. The wheels came off in the second half of the year last year. And as you mentioned, Eric, he was so much better in that final third of the year this year. It's a positive development to see a guy who got 21 points in the last 28 games. Now, mind you, a lot of that may have been being just put on a line with TK and Mitchkov, but he still showed progression even before that he was playing better. He was playing better defensively. He still has a high hockey IQ, and you know what you have in him. I think he still has the intangibles of a high-end 3C. If he's getting you mid to high 40 points a year, maybe he does take another step forward. That's great. I mean, it's not great in terms of the contract he has because he's getting paid almost $8 million a year, but it's not the albatross overpayment we once thought it was, but he has to keep doing that for it to be that way. And I obviously don't think it will. That term is catastrophic. So realistically, I think this year he probably is only overpaid by about $2 million, maybe $2.5 million. But I'm glad at least in terms that Couturier took a step forward compared to last year, that maybe he's not completely cooked, that he can at least still provide. He's never going to live up to the 7.75 mil, but if he can at least play like a 5 to 5.5 million a year player for the next 3-4 years, at least you garnered something out of a contract. That's the way I look at it. You'll never get Selke Coots again. That Coots is dead, unfortunately. But at least he took the step forward. And now my number 3 guy is definitely Jamey Drysdale. I think Jamey hit the hammer on the nail with him. He said at the beginning of the year, Jamey Drysdale had the core muscle surgery, and you would not expect Jamey to find Jamey Drysdale to hit his form until early to mid-January. Our Jamey, not the Jamey playing hockey, that is. And that was about the time he turned the corner. John Tortorella, I actually think, said it best back in the offseason. They need to completely redo and refine his game because the way he was developed in Anaheim kind of fucked with his confidence. He came out of the gates hot after the trade, and then he kind of just fell off towards the end of the year last year, and it kind of led into this year. He had the core muscle surgery yet again for Flyer players. But around January, the page was turned, and in the second half of the year, he looked so much better. I think there's a path that he could be your next good offensive power play quarterback, like your Timo Timonen or your Shane Gostisbehere, hopefully. And it also makes you put this into perspective that people need to realize, A, how young he still is. He's only 23 years old, I believe?
I think so.
And number 2, how much longer it takes for defensemen to develop. Travis Sanheim is a good example. You've mentioned him on prior episodes, Eric. It took to about age 27 for him to really hone his craft. He had a fantastic year last year. He had a good year this year. I don't think it was as good as last year, but it was still a good year. I still give Sanheim the benefit of the doubt there. Look at Rasmus Ristolainen. They redid his craft a little bit. Yeah, he still has some durability issues, but he's now playing a very physical style of defense that garners that of a top 4 defenseman. And hopefully Jamey Drysdale can go down that path and continue to take steps forward in his development. He's only 23. He's not going anywhere. He's part of your future. He was the big piece in that Cutter Gauthier trade. So you look at the big picture. When it comes to Jamey Drysdale, I'm happy that he took the step forward, and I'm confident that you're going to see something in him later down the line. Number 2 is Bobby Brink. Bobby Brink was a guy that I thought was potentially on the way out after last year. He could have been maybe used as a potential trade last offseason. I thought the Flyers might be looking at the big picture that maybe he could be used to acquire a center that I thought they were going to be making the trade for last season. Looks like it's likely going to happen this offseason that they make the move. But I don't feel like that Bobby Brink could be that guy. I think there's still more there. He played a lot bigger than his size indicated. Remember the hit he made in that Anaheim game. Remember how much I reacted to it? And he showed that he's got more intangibles to his game. I think he was hovering right around 40 points this year. And he's someone that you feel confident in that could take potential steps forward. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, to go back, Jamey Drysdale is only 22. I thought he was 23. But Bobby Brink, I'm happy at what we've seen in progression. And he's a guy that could be a high-end third-line guy. I don't think you'll ever see him as a consistent second-line right winger because you already got your 2 guys there anyway in Konechny and Michkov, which makes me hope they eventually get a true left winger. But I'm happy at what we saw in him and his progression. And number 1, I clamored about him the last 2 weeks. I'm going to do it again. It's Tyson Forster. He has shown to me that I think you got your next. Noah Cates is an honorable mention too, but I'd be here all day if I mentioned him. But just shout out to Noah Cates too. He deserves an honorable mention. But Tyson Forster, I look at him and I think you got a guy that has the ceiling that could be a potential 60-plus point guy in the future when he hits his prime. A two-way guy that could sniff 30 goals, that could sniff 60 points, and that could play a physical style on the wing that you feel comfortable with long-term. He's taken another step forward. He needs to, as Isaiah mentioned, he needs to hone his shot a little bit better, but he took steps forward. And I want to see a guy that could do what he mentioned Owen Tippett does so well, beat guys one-on-one, and maybe take that next step in his development. Be a guy you feel comfortable sending out there in 3-on-3 situations as well. Tyson Forrester took a step, and it was a bigger one than I think people believe because his two-way game really doesn't get enough credit. I love what Tyson gave this year, and he's very mature for his age. He's also only 23 years old, so he's got plenty of room for development too. He's my number one. Negatives. Number 3, I want to give an honorable mention to the power play. It sucked again. Please get Rocky fucking Thompson out of here. Whoever the next coach is, that should be your first 10 years to fire him. I don't want him anywhere near this organization. Number 3, I got to go with Cam York. Cam York, and we're probably going to have the same 3 here to an extent. Cam York, I think, was a little bit in his own head this year, as we mentioned. He met with his mental struggles at the beginning of the year. He dealt with his mental struggles with his disagreements in John Tortorella, the benching in that Toronto game. He did regress. He took accountability for it. I respect that about him. I really hope whoever the next coach is can unlock what's next, as we've mentioned as well. Number 2 is Owen Tippett. Please, this kid's got to learn how to hit the net consistently. I knew he was missing the net a lot again this year. I didn't realize how bad it was until Eric brought up the numbers. He's missing the net more than he's hitting it is a major concern. Now, mind you, I agree with Eric too. It's probably just a down year for the kid. 20 goals after having 27 and 28 the 2 prior years. I had him at the beginning of the year leading the team in goals. I had him somewhere in the mid-30s. I thought he'd take the next step. I thought he'd learn to hit the net better. And what's frustrating about Owen Tippett is there's so much untapped potential there. He is such a fast skater. He is such an underrated puck handler. He can make moves that make you dazzled at times. But if this kid could hone that and learn to hit the net, you have a potential offensive dynamo in this kid. I really would love to see him push for top 6 minutes, especially now that consistently, now that you have him for 8 years. But he found himself on the 3rd line at the end of the year with Peltier and Paling. And not to disrespect Paling and Peltier, but when you're a guy with the talent of Owen Tippett, you want to see him deserve and earn those second and first line minutes that he should be playing every single night. And his inability to hit the net, I think he got into his own head a little bit too. As you mentioned, Eric, he took 100 less shots this year, so he probably passed up a lot of opportunities too. That probably had a lot to do with his numbers going down. You're a shooter, kid. Shoot the puck. That's what you're there for. And I really hope the Flyers bring in a playmaker that could be there to help, whether it's him or Mitchkoff or Konechny or whatever. We'll get into that shortly with our end of the season predictions. But Tippett is not a number 2 just because he didn't take the step forward that I hope. And number 1, I'm going to say the goaltending as a whole, not just Urson, because all 3 of them were bad. Alexei Kolosov, I don't even want him in the organization next year. I know that how much of it was his fault, I don't know, but I'm ready to just move on. Ivan Fedotov, I'm just happy he even came here after what he has dealt with out in Russia with the military issues that he dealt with. But he's also age 29. I'd like to see him back maybe in the AHL next year. And then if you get an injury, maybe he hones his craft a little bit. You can have him as a call-up guy for potential emergency situations. But let's be honest with ourselves. He's not going to be the goalie that we hoped he'd be. And then obviously Samuel Ersson, he dealt with the groin injuries earlier in the year. I don't know how much – he said he was playing injured, so I don't know how much that particular injury dealt with. It probably had something to do with it. But at the same time, as you mentioned, Eric, he is what he is at this point. I don't want to have him playing 48 to 50 games. I really do hope they find another goalie outside the system to maybe play a 1-8 perspective. And I do feel confident enough that Urson can still hold maybe 32, 34 starts where he won't be this bad next year, because you saw what you could potentially get in him last year. And maybe he cracks back to that plus 900 save percentage. Maybe he cracks down to about a 2.7, 2.6 goals against average next year. Maybe you get that guy when he's not being worked as much, and maybe when he's a little healthier. And when you're not working him as much that year, in general, you don't get the injuries that he deals with. So I hope they go for a guy outside the system to take some weight off of him. Does anyone else have anything to add before we move on?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention something we talked about on OandB regarding Ivan Fedotov, because it really make a great Hollywood movie, even if it's only at the level of like TV movie. The only thing is they'd have to really put some Hollywood in there where he actually stops the puck.
Yeah, true.
Right.
He's got to do the stopping part. Yeah.
Right. That's where they'd have to put the Hollywood touch in there. Yeah. Him making great saves and all that. It's a great story, but the likelihood that he is much of anything at his age, probably because of the time he missed, is not great. And the only thing I could see him is, would he agree as a Russian goaltender to go to the AHL? Apparently, unless you're Nikita Grabenkin, you're a low-level player from when you were drafted, that you don't want to come to the play in the AHL.
I watched Fedotov in net too. He just looks so unorthodox, and his save style is just so weird. He never looks comfortable.
You can't project what kind of game he's going to have. He could be having a good game, and unless he lets in one of those like vapor goals where like, wait a minute, well, how'd that get by him? It's unbelievable.
He gets beat over the shoulder. He's 6'7", 6'8".
I know. He makes himself small. He just does everything wrong. And sometimes he makes a save. It's almost like Hasek, but it's a reverse result. It's you can't have a guy like that even as a backup, because you need someone who can go in there and make saves, even if it's nothing spectacular.
Yeah. And listen, I love the kid. He, like I said, it's just awesome that he even got here. I hope he becomes a finalist for the Masterson, to be honest with you. I don't think he'll win it. I think Sean Monahan's going to get it this year with how everything happened with the Johnny Gaudreau saga.
Yeah.
And I'm more than happy with that for him winning it. But Ivan Fedotov, I think with what he dealt with and the nonsense he dealt with, it would be cool to see him get the Masters. And he had about a good 2.5 month span where he was playing decent, but there was those in between. It was like a sandwich. Horrible Fedotov, decent Fedotov, back to horrible Fedotov. And we talked about in prior episodes, we thought there was a chance that he'd never see a game here again, because I got tipped off by someone that between him and Torts, they weren't getting along. And then when Torts got fired, he suddenly found himself back in the fray. So I wonder if that would have went to fruition if Torts ended up staying here the entirety of the year. But when it comes to Fedotov, I agree with you, Isaiah. At some point, you've got to just look at the big picture. Hopefully he will agree to an AHL run next year, because he can be your Cal Peterson, and maybe when a guy like Carson Bjornsson, when he comes over and plays full-time in the AHL, he has a guy who's got a little bit of veteran experience that knows what it's like to play in the pro leagues now, both in the KHL and in NHL, that he can maybe pass off a little bit of wisdom of what to expect. So I that would be, I think, beneficial to Bjornsson next year. Hopefully he does agree to that. But anything else you guys want to add?
I'm good.
All right. Final topic of this was off-season and what to expect. So this, in my opinion, is the first of two massive off-seasons. I think these are the two biggest off-seasons for the Philadelphia Flyers, potentially in the last 20 years, this and next one. So it looks like it's pretty apparent that Danny Briere is going to start making the moves to at least add a little bit. I don't expect this to be an overnight fix. They're not going to make a bunch of major moves, but I do expect at least 1 or 2 moves of significance this offseason. So let's talk about this, what we would like to see, whether it's through the draft, coaching, free agency. Let's start with the coach. Who are some guys you guys would like to see them hone in on? Isaiah, let me start with you.
Well, that's really a tough one. If you go by what's rumored out there, first you hear Tocchet really doesn't want to stay in Vancouver. He's assessing his options. And then you hear, oh, no, he's the way he's speaking. If you read Thomas Drance, it's just as likely that he will stay in Vancouver. And he did some things that were, everybody's trying to read between the lines. So, but Tocchet is in there. He's obviously a candidate, even though the team has an option and they can say, hey, we're not going to let you go, because I don't think you can give compensation anymore.
Yeah.
No. I think if he didn't want to be the coach, you can't force him, So, but he would be one of the candidates. And there's a lot of talk about David Carl at University of Denver, a college coach, and he has a fantastic record. And, the thing is, so he's never really had any contact with the NHL as a coach. Of course, he was a player. Then he had the congenital heart problem, and it's a great story in perseverance. So, he's got some real character to be able to just give up his dream to play in the NHL and just convert that into being a coach, and a very successful one at a great program. There's a lot to recommend with that player. And then there's a guy like Todd Nelson. You see what Spencer Carberry did in Hershey, right? And Todd Nelson has won at least 1, maybe 2 Calder Cups in a row for Hershey taking over. And he has NHL experience. And yet he's a young guy who can relate and can explain to today's players, why I want you to do something, not just do it. And, he's in that group. You have the wild cards.
Give us one moment, everyone.
Sorry. Nasty cold. That's what I get for going up north. Anyway, and you have the wild cards like Coach Q. I don't think the Flyers are going to touch him with a 10-foot pole because of the PR situation. So I don't think that's really likely. And then, of course, there's what I think is no longer a dark horse. There's Pat Frischweiler from Western Michigan. He just won the NCAA title with Alex Bump and that program. And what may recommend him is that he was an assistant coach in Detroit, so he has NHL experience. So he also was a friend of Keith Jones. He was a line mate back in the day when they were players. And also the fact that he took a program that wasn't a BU or a BC or a Denver and led them to a title. So
that's a plus. That's definitely a plus, yeah. In a moment.
Playing hurt today. Yeah. So there was something that you can recommend with him is that he could hit the ground running in terms of his understanding of how the league works, how you communicate with players, something that you can't skip. That's something David Carl would have to go through. Mm-hmm. And so there's some candidates. I'm not really sure. I think Tocchet is like a light version of
Torts,
or maybe like Berube, but maybe not quite the hard ass that Berube can be. And it might be the right calibration for the Flyers. But there's something intriguing about a guy who worked his way up, like Todd Nelson. He had a chance with Edmonton, I believe, and he learned from that. There's a lot of coaches that struck out on their first try. The guy in Las Vegas, who
Bruce Cassidy.
Cassidy was with the with Boston. So I mean, and before that, he had a chance. I mean, he did well with Boston. It didn't work there, and they got rid of him. So I mean, I'm a little bit hesitant with Carl because I think there's a learning curve there. Although I think he's probably be a very good head coach. So I would say between Todd Nelson and Pat Ferschweiler of the guys that we're hearing about. Other than that, I can only guess who might be available.
Yeah, there's some interesting names there for sure. This is going to be an interesting hire just in general. How about you, Eric? Who would you like?
Well, you know what? Someone just became available today. Alain Vigneault.
No,
Do we go back? Do we get a blast from the past?
no. I'd rather bring Torch
No,
back
no,
than
no,
bring
no.
AV back.
No,
Yeah.
no, I'm just joking around. There's no way I would hire
Better
Vigneault.
Peter
GG than
Laviolette,
Sorry, not
AV.
Vigneault. Sorry, Laviolette.
Yeah,
Sorry.
even him still no.
All these French names, they all blend together. Anyway, yeah, no, look, honestly, Freshwater sounds probably like, for me, out of all the candidates that like I've been hearing, he kind of seems like probably the best one, I think, at the moment. Because look, he took a program that has like is not known as a winning program and took them to a national championship. And someone had mentioned like he went up against a team in Denver that has multiple first round picks, and I don't even think the Western Michigan even had one, so it's like, so he did like a fantastic job. Plus, like Isaiah said, he has the experience also in the league. He's been an assistant before, I think, in the NHL too, and he's been in the AHL as well. So he has experience with men, with professionals. So that would make sense. Other than that, like, look, I don't know. I really don't know. But obviously, I don't want to. I think they got to bring in a guy who because it's such a young team, because they're going to bring in such young players. It has to be someone that's patient but yet stern, because like you don't want to go with another Torts. You don't like you just came off Torts. You don't want to bring another guy that's another hard ass, another that's going to be on their case. No, but you want someone that's going to be able to teach these kids to bring them forward, but at the same time is not a pushover either, because you don't want to go complete opposite direction either. You don't want to go from hard coach to easy coach, and then because then you might lose the room like that. So yeah, look, I think Danny has his work cut out for him. He's gonna be interviewing. Like, is Shaw, like, look, Shaw too is a possibility. I personally, I don't think they go with Shaw. What I liked what Shaw said in his presser yesterday is that he'd be willing to stay on as an assistant.
I love that about him.
And man, I was so happy when I heard that, because look, man, the guy's done a fantastic job with the defense here. So I'd really hate to lose a guy like that. But yeah, no, look, candidates, like I said, I don't have that many names in mind. But like I said, it's got to be someone, I think, like young, not super young, but like someone, like I said, that's a teacher that's going to teach these kids the right way to play. That's going to, that could bring them forward, but at the same time stern. Like I said, that's it.
Good choices, very good choices. So I've been thinking and kind of bouncing around. Obviously, David Carl's a big guy, University of Denver. I am hearing, though, someone, I don't remember who it was that reported it, saying the Flyers don't seem like they're heavily interested in him. I'm not exactly sure why. Maybe because he might just be honing on a team already. My guess, Chicago. But a guy hasn't been mentioned that I would like potentially is Jay Woodcroft, former coach of Edmonton. I thought he was pretty decent there before being eventually let go. He's always been a coach that I feel like that gets the most out of players offensively. So I think that wouldn't be a bad direction to potentially lean in. As you mentioned, Isaiah, what was it, Ferschweiler? Excuse me if I
Ferschweiler, yeah.
Ferschweiler. Western Michigan just led his team to a national title, took down quite a few powerhouses, took down powerhouse BU on the way there. And maybe with Alex Bump potentially coming up too. He's got some familiarity with him. So that would be an interesting name to watch as well. I was thinking before Torts got let go, one name I would have enjoyed possibly was Mike Sullivan, but I'm not 100% sure if that ship has sailed yet or not, with Torts now leaving, or if Sullivan's even going to get let go by the Penguins. So
I don't think so.
We'll see. I think most likely. But Woodcroft is a name I think that would be interesting to watch. Rick Tocchet scares me a little because I look back at the situation between him and Elias Pettersson, and I don't know how that would be here with another potential star. So I do worry about that. But if I have to pick one candidate I would like, it would probably be Jay Woodcroft right now. I think he would be a guy that deserves a potential second chance. But I'd like to keep Shaw here to some capacity, as you mentioned during his presser today. He'd like to potentially stay with the team if they'd have him back, whether it be as the head coach or even as an assistant. And that shows to me as a team guy. I'd love to have him back running the PK, still running with the defensive players that they have. He's a classy guy. He seems like he's very loose, but he also is someone that will try to do what's best for you as well. So those would be my candidates. Draft is right around the corner. As we mentioned, Flyers have the fourth best odds. Who are some guys you'd like to potentially land? Assuming they're the fourth, let's say just hypothetically, they're the fourth pick. Who would you want? Let me start with you, Eric.
If they do stay at 4, most probably it's gonna end up between Misa. Sorry, not Misa. Misa's going 2 for sure. It's gonna probably between Higgins or Frendel, and honestly, I'm good with either. Frendel is the bigger body, so like having a center with a little bit more size would definitely help because Luchenko is not that he's undersized, but like he's under 6 feet if I'm not mistaken. I think he's 5'11", but the kid's strong, so at least he has that going for him. Or else, yeah, that's it. But Higgins has exceptional skill. So, and apparently his two-way game is also is excellent also. So, yeah, look, either one of those guys for me, if we could get him at 4, that'd just be a luxury.
Yeah. How about you, Isaiah?
I would tend to agree, although I would have a bias in favor of Frendel. And the reason I say that, we had Steve Cornianos, the draft analyst, on our last show, and he mentioned some things that really made an impression on me. First off, he said, look, when you're drafting, you're building a team. You're not just collecting talent. If you want to see what that looks like, just look at Buffalo. Collect talent, and go nowhere. Because the pieces don't fit. So you want the pieces to fit. If Luchenko, who can't seem to get a shot off, and is really just an assist guy, and even when he improves, it's never going to be dramatic. He's always going to be differential on the line that he's on, and he's a smaller guy. And then you have another guy with Higgins who's probably more well-rounded and more, worthy of being in the upper part of the draft. Then you have two smaller guys. Higgins is faster, but Luchenko is a speed demon. Frendel is a heavy shot guy. He's played against men. And according to Steve, he said, of all the top prospects in this draft, nobody can touch Frendel in terms of how well they played since January. So if you want to draft a guy who is ascending just as you're about to draft him, who was already rated high, in other words, he didn't come from nowhere, kind of like Luchenko did, Sanheim did in his year, a rising player. Here's a guy who was already near the top, who extended his, the window, his ceiling, if you will. Then I would tend to take or favor Frendel. That said, if they got Higgins, really good two-way player, was very good offensive instincts, better speed and puck skills, I wouldn't be unhappy that. But we would be a little small at center.
I am 1,000% on the Anton Frendel bandwagon. I'm gonna make a bold statement here too. If the Flyers were to land as high as 2, I might still take him over Michael Misa. That's how much I am on this kid. Big body, dominates puck battles, hell of a shot, good two-way game. He's physical. The only negative I've seen on this kid's game is his transition game. He's not much of a guy who helps start the play. But you know what? That's fine. That's what you have your line mates for anyway. Anton Frendel would be a glove fit for a guy like Matvei Michkov, in my opinion. With his shot, you have another guy who's threatening, who can shoot the puck, and his two-way game is dynamic. I've heard people bring up the fact that they don't think he's a potential 1C. Even if he's not a center, he's a one left winger at worst, which is another gaping hole that this team has. But I don't agree with that. I think he's a 1C. And as you mentioned, Isaiah, he is dominated, absolutely dominated since January. He is a kid that has been playing almost at a point per game pace in the 29 games he's played in the Swedish Pro League that he's in right now. He plays with that kid Eklund, who, mind you, is another kid I'd watch to potentially trade up for if you have the possibility to do so. We'll see what the Flyers do with their 8 billion picks in the first 2 rounds. But this kid, Frindell, he's a big body, and he's exactly what this team needs, is some real legit size down the middle. And you get a kid like that, you fix, in my opinion, your 1C issue for the future. Because this kid has been absolutely dynamic. And I'm saying it right now, I would not be, if they moved up to 2 and they still picked Frindell, I would not be upset. That's how much I've liked this kid over the last few months. He is an absolute machine in puck battles. And that's another thing that is so underrated about his game. If there's one other worry I have about him, and it's a small one, he does have a little bit of knee issues. So he just, I think, underwent surgery a couple weeks ago for a knee issue for that. It was 3 to 4 weeks, and I think he had another knee issue prior to that. So that gives me a little bit of worry, but it doesn't seem like it's anything that's going to give any long-term impact to his game. I am all aboard on the Anton Frindell trade. Would I be mad if they drafted Higgins? No, that's probably my number 2 pick. But would I be mad if they drafted like a Roger McQueen or a Caleb Desnoyers in that spot? Yeah, I'd be pissed. So number 1 is Frindell, if they stay at 4. Number 2 is probably Higgins. And then it's a massive gap, and then maybe like Jake O'Brien or Porter Matone. But I don't want Porter Matone because I got enough right wingers to begin with anyway. So in order, Frindell, gap, Higgins, seismic gap, and then probably Jake O'Brien. But,
yeah, don't forget McQueen's coming up a spinal fracture. And after what happened with Caden Lindstrom last year.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I'm getting Caden Lindstrom and even Nolan Patrick PTSD with that kid. Yeah. No, thank you. Let someone else have that headache. No.
Yeah. Question. Okay, Flyers get number 1. All right, who you drafted?
Schaefer.
That's when I'm going Schaefer.
That's
the only. I'm going Schaefer. That is the only spot I'd take. I would not draft Frindell at.
We're unanimous then. Okay.
Yeah. It's the only spot.
Yeah,
that kid's a franchise defenseman.
We need a number 1 defenseman just as much as we need a number 1 center. And
at least you have some 2 3s and some 3s, 4s, and maybe even a potential 2 D-man. You don't have that at center. That's a big difference. But
if you could go in the future, if you can go Schaefer, Jamey Drysdale as your top pairing, that actually might be pretty pretty incredible.
Get a little excited here.
It could be a very, very, and then you could run, if you still have York, you could run York and Sanheim as your second pair.
Oh, geez. All right. Last question, and then we'll wrap things up because we're getting close to that 2-hour mark. Off-season moves. If you can make one off-season move, what player would you hone in on? Isaiah, let me start with you.
I don't know if I can give a name.
Or maybe even a general type of player you'd want.
Well, they need to have 2 major needs that I expect them to fill. And we may not be happy with the choices they make. They need a goaltender. I expect that to be anywhere from the range of a Jake Allen to possibly taking a chance on John Gibson as a tandem goaltender.
You've mentioned him before.
Maybe in a big deal where they find a way to get Mason McTavish and solve the other problem. Mm-hmm. Now, they take on that salary, but they also get McTavish, and we give a little. Whatever, we might not like it. Maybe, I don't know. Just pick a player that you like.
They have to move on like an Owen Tippett or something like that.
Well, maybe your boy Ty Foster. You know, I mean.
Oh, now you're hurting my soul.
Wait, if you want, hey, what's more important? Getting a center?
Yeah, no, I get it.
Right? So I would make that trade because I think getting a center is critical. Mm-hmm. Absolutely critical. They need a professional center someone that can play with top end talent and keep up with the play. Now, I'm not saying McTavish or even Gabe Velarde is a burner, but you need someone with the hockey sense and enough wheels, and that either that or a stoutness, like you're talking about Frundell and how many board battles he wins. Well, that's McTavish's game, right? He's a big body and he's a real bull. And the same thing with Velarde. Even though Velarde really hasn't been a center in the NHL, he's only been a winger, but he did come up as a center. So, but he's got injury flags. But those are the kind of players. They need a goaltender and a center. I think the goaltender more than likely will be a Band-Aid, a temporary
bridge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably like a bridge goalie, something along those lines.
The center could be a bridge, but also could be a younger player.
Mm-hmm.
They take a stab out of Velarde, McTavish, another player, but not someone they necessarily, Marco Rossi, if they wanted to try. Again, he can only be so small. When you have Lutsenko as your center, and I would not rush him, by the way. Just one, I'm going to digress. Please, I mean, he does not. He looks like he's a little bit over his head right now. Maybe he's tired and all that, but don't rush him.
Yes, I agree. I want him to play another year in the OHL if you have to. I'm with that.
Yeah, try to force their hand to trade him so he doesn't have to. He's not stuck with Guelph in that last place squad. But anyway, yeah, they need a center and a goaltender regardless. So it's just a matter of, are they going to get a patchwork bridge player or in goal? That's what I think that definitely where they're going, to try to see if they get to the point where either Bjarnason or more than likely Zafragan would be ready by the time this guy's ready to check out. And then, of course, at center, then, shoot the works. I mean, whatever it takes to get a center. If you can get a bridge guy, that's all you can do. Great. They need somebody. But if you can get a guy who you're going to grow with in the future, better yet.
Good breakdowns. I agree with a lot of that. How about you, Eric?
Well, I think definitely goaltending has to be addressed this offseason, whether it be through free agency or trade. I think Donnie does make a move guaranteed. I think obviously center is the biggest need. I think they are going to bring somebody in. And look, for me, I've been on the Shane Wright train for a while. I think he's one guy I'd really be interested in bringing in here. Don't know how available he is. Seattle, like, look, they're going to go through a rebuild, and he's a young kid, so you don't want to, I think, Columbus has a few young good centers. Like we brought Mason McTavish. He's great too. The one name I'm going to key in on, very young center, still like with a lot of potential, is Maverick Bourque. I think Dallas is ripe for the picking this offseason. They have, if I'm not mistaken, I was looking at it the other day, but they have either 15 or 16 players signed for next season out of 23 with only $5.8 million in cap space. So that's rough. That's rough for them.
They put all that money on Mikko Rantanen.
Exactly. But look, they have to re-sign Matt Duchene if they want to bring him back. I think they really love Matt Duchene, and he's been playing center for them. So a guy like Bourque, look, you just lost. If they bring back Duchene, you lost your spot, buddy. Like they've been playing him on the fourth line or healthy scratching him. So I think he's a guy that could be had. And you could also, and he might look. You could offer sheet him up to, like, I think $4.5 million, and it's only going to cost you a second. So, and there's no way they can match that. That's guaranteed. They don't match. I personally think it's going to be through trade. And a guy I would like, if the Flyers can make some kind of deal to bring with Bourque, is Mason Marchment. If they can, and that would free up $4.5 million for Dallas also. And so you bring in Bourque and Marchment, and you wouldn't have to be giving up much, because at the same time, you're also doing them a favor.
True.
Something that I put out on Twitter, I go, was something like a Brink. And I know you're losing Brink. Look, good young player.
Yep.
But
no, that you got to make sacrifices.
For Mason Marchment and Maverick Bourque. So maybe something like that might work. Or also, they have Matt Dumba on the team, who's making, I think, 3.5 or 3.7, somewhere in that range. And they've been vocal about, like, they have to get rid of that contract because he's just not playing well for them. Maybe we take that contract back. Look, you're going to have Risto that's probably going to be missing games at the beginning of the season. Now, I'm not saying that Matt Dumba's Risto, like, no, but you're helping them out again. So maybe Bork might even cost you only like a 3rd round pick. Like, yeah, we'll take Dumba. You give us Bork, and then we'll give you like a 3rd or a 4th. So that's what I'm just saying. I'm think Dallas is a team that's ripe for the picking, and Briere would be really smart to like try and target, because good young center, man, good young center, and that's what we need. So
I like it. I like it. So you know who I have honed in on for a center that I've loved for so long. We've talked about him in prior episodes, and I know it might seem like a little bit of a pipe dream, but looking at the team that the Seattle Kraken are right now, that they are in the midst of needing a rebuild, and you could give them some pieces that could potentially help them in the long term. A guy that I would love to see if you could somehow, some way try to entice them, even if it's a little bit of an overpay, would be Matty Beniers. He is a two-way. He is a very good two-way forward. Already a lot of term left on his deal. I think he's 22, 23 years old. He's kind of regressed a little bit offensively his last 2 years after having that near 60-point rookie campaign. I think he only had about 43 points this year, if I remember off the top of my head. But he plays a very good two-way style of game. They need some young defensemen. I look at Seattle's D-core. 4 of their defensemen are aged 28 to 32. And they need to accept that they need to go into a rebuild, because Seattle's not going anywhere. They have an older – a lot of their good players are older, and they need to start tearing it down. And you look at their center position. You already have Shane Wright. You have Berkeley Catton on the way. Why not try to see if you can entice them for a guy like that? Maybe you send them like a Cam York if you want to try something like that. You got to give to get. And I know losing York would suck, but you got to give up a guy like Cam York. You give them the young defenseman that they need, and maybe you give them some draft capital as well. There's ways a trade like that could potentially be facilitated. That's my pipe dream hope. Does it happen? Probably not, but that's the guy I personally would hone in on. Isaiah mentioned McTavish as a potential trade or offer sheet. I love that too. Good, big physical guy, good puck battler amongst the boards. Another guy, and Maverick Bork, as you mentioned, Eric, would be an interesting name too. Dallas is definitely in a desperate spot cap situation wise. Goaltending, we're looking at. I think it's going to be a bridge guy as well. I don't know if Jake Allen would want to leave New Jersey at his age in his comfortable position. I think he ends up re-signing there. I look at a guy maybe like Alex Lyon. He's got some playoff experience out in Florida. You can maybe have him as a 1A, play 44, 46 games. Via trade, John Gibson. That would be a name I'd definitely be in trade with. He's got 2 years left at $6.4 million. Maybe even can convince Anaheim to eat a little bit of the cap. They have plenty of cap space to make his contract a little more affordable. The pipe dream situation there, although he deals with his injuries, so I don't know how much I would like it. Maybe even tap Cherdenko if Vancouver looks into a potential rebuild as well. I don't know. You can look into that perspective as well. But yeah, Freddie Anderson's a name, but he's got a ton of injury history. So I don't know if I want to go down that route too. No. But they're going to add in net. Who it is, I don't know. But those are some names I would look at. Any final thoughts before we wrap things up, gentlemen?
I got one.
Go ahead.
And it was summarized yet again, and it came to mind during the Briere press conference today. The whole thing with Kolosov, the mystery behind it, is the biggest cluster F in the history of the franchise. Mm-hmm. I have never, ever seen something that is so secretive. It's this.
That's why I just want him gone at this point. Just get this headache out of here.
It's the craziest thing. It's the weirdest thing. It's almost like they're holding the future of Russian players that they have yet to get a hold of, like Zavragin, over the head of the Flyers based on how they treat Kolosov or something like that. Like the Russian Federation is more or less dictating to the Flyers. I can't figure out. I've never seen anything so crazy, and I want it to go away. So I want him to go away. Sam Filippo said that he's gone. He's going home. And that's what he thinks. He didn't have a definite, but based on his sourcing, he surmises that we have seen the last of Alexei Kolosov. If you watch the presser today from Briere, it's almost like he's walking on eggshells. So
he didn't even want to get into it when someone asked him the question about that. He'd say, "I'm not getting into that right now." That tells you everything you need to know. There's something there, and I think you're 100% right that he's likely gone.
Yeah,
but it's me and Eric and Jamey have all hammered that drum all year on this show. What the hell has happened here this year with him has absolutely just blown my mind. But
somebody's got pictures. And Briere's
he's got blackmail on someone for sure.
I've never seen an organization bend so over backwards for a guy that has proven nothing. I don't understand. Even the fact that he's dictating, no, I'm up here or I don't come. Buddy, don't come. And you're not going to play in Russia either. Like, that's it.
Yeah. Hold on to his rights and just let him rot. That would be the best way to do it at this point.
You stay on your couch or you go to Lehigh. One or the other. You're not playing for Minsk.
At this point, send him to Reading. I don't even want him in Lehigh anymore. Anyway. All right, everyone. That's going to wrap it up on our season recap. Thank you all so much for tuning in. It was another incredible episode and a fantastic season, at least giving you coverage. The Flyers season so much could have been better, but hopefully next year at this point, maybe we're talking playoff series. Who knows if Danny can make the right moves. But anyway, Isaiah, thank you for tuning in and coming on to the show today. Everyone, give him a follow on Twitter at the OandBPuck and check out his podcast at the OandBPuckcast. Fantastic content there all the time. Give him a watch, give him a listen, give him a follow. Thank you again, Isaiah, for coming on. And as always, Eric, thank you for being on as well. We are done with the 2024-2025 season. We're officially in off-season mode right now. But we will still be giving you some awesome coverage throughout the year. We'll probably be going into a more abbreviated schedule as the summer goes on. To be determined if we're going to have an episode next week. We were talking off the air, so we might be going to an every other week type of schedule, at least for the time being, and take it from there. But we'll be spreading that out as we get more information. But with all that being said, thank you all for tuning in. Another fantastic episodes, and we'll see you guys next season and throughout the summer as some news comes in. But as we have breaking news, we'll definitely be here. So with all that being said, thank you all for tuning in. Have a great night, and as always, let's go Flyers.